If you work in D2C and you use AI and you're wondering what the F is going on every week, this is your podcast, the AI-DTC-WTF-Podcast, your home for tactical tips, strategies, and ideas that you can implement right now into your AI workflows to make your brand or agency more money. Hey, welcome to another episode of AI-DTC-WTF. So glad to have you here. This podcast is all about ensuring you have tactical advice to take away and utilize in your e-commerce agency or brand right away. That's really what we're doing here at the AI-D2C podcast. So I'm excited to have you, Freddie. For those of you that don't know Freddie, he is a German badass on AI, somebody that I respect and who is absolutely always building incredible things. Freddie, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I'm glad to be here.
So what have you been up to lately? I mean, I know that you're doing a lot of creative strategy. So have you been building tools on creative strategy, or what kind of stuff have you been building that's with AI that's been making your life a lot easier?
Yes, doing lots of creative strategy, kind of transitioning away from that and just building more with AI, helping other agencies implement AI. And, there are so many, important use cases or useful use cases, especially nowadays with the models getting better, Claude being there. The first thing that comes to my mind is just like probably research agent, research skill that sits in Claude. It just, does persona research. It looks up words, it looks up reviews, and it basically builds this whole, persona sheet that, other skills that I'm using, such as like a scriptwriter or whatever, can kind of access, and then the outputs of the stuff that I'm getting from AI are way more, tailored to the brands that I'm working with.
So talk us through how you're doing this on the research agent. So this thing, give me the tactical rundown. So this thing, you built it, how it sits in Claude, and how are you telling it to go find things? What kind of stuff is it, doing tactically?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's basically a Claude skill. So, it's super easy to create. You don't need any coding experience or whatsoever, really. It's connected to Foreplay. Foreplay has basically an MCP server, which you can connect essentially in one click to Claude. Then it can use, Foreplay for you, basically. It's also connected to another kind of program that is called Firecrawl. And Firecrawl also has an MCP server, but you can also connect in one click. So everything is pretty straightforward. And, Firecrawl can essentially scrape websites for you. So this, research agent is, connected to Firecrawl, connected to Foreplay, and then has instructions for me, on stuff that I want. So, for example, words that the brand uses, and it extracts reviews from, for example, Trustpilot or the brand's website. It scans competitors, looks at competitors' ads using Foreplay. And then at the end comes up with different personas. I basically give a thumbs up or thumbs down, whether I like the persona or not. And then it gets added to kind of my database of personas for this brand. And then from there on, I can reference it in other skills that I'm running, essentially.
Cool. Just jumping in here, Andrew, I think this is super interesting and super cool. So I'm not so familiar with the Foreplay. I played around with Firecrawl, which is just amazing to just get a lot of data out pretty quickly. But can you explain a bit more what Foreplay is?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Foreplay is basically just a tool that allows, you to kind of save Facebook ads from the ads library, right? But the great thing about it is that they have an API or, an MCP server that you can connect to. So you can automatically crawl your competitors, ads library, for example. You get the transcripts of the videos easily. You can download the videos. And then, for example, downloading the videos, you can throw these videos into Gemini, which, you can also connect with an MCP. And then you can basically visually analyze the videos. For example, what's going on in the hooks, what's going on in the first 3 seconds, what kind of angles are they using, what kind of visuals maybe are they using, what kind of text overlay. So, this gets super helpful for you kind of analyzing competitors.
Okay, wow. So basically where Firecrawl goes and looks at websites and gives you the information, Foreplay is a way where you can basically scrape ads libraries and give you that data in a structured way so you can work from there.
Yes, exactly. You can see how long ads have been running, etc. Which is not always a telltale sign for whether something is a winner, but especially if it's a video, it's been running for quite some time. And maybe the ad is running the same kind of concept over and over again. I'm pretty sure that this is a winning concept. I can have it analyzed using the API inside of my Claude, and then kind of can identify winning patterns this way.
So you're going through running this research agent. It's doing tons of stuff for you. It's looking at these tools. What other? I mean, one thing I've always wondered about the research tool looking at Reddit is that can it get into Reddit threads like logging in and that kind of thing? Because sometimes the stuff that's publicly available is not as good. And does it actually what's the output of it? Does it come out with different angles you can pursue? Like, is it a written document? Like what's the output you have it going into? Or is it actually just going into creating the ads?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's also basically for Reddit, there's like a separate basically MCP server that you would connect to. In terms of output that I'm getting, and maybe I can link this in the show notes or whatever, but it's basically like a 10-page document, which may sound overkill at first, but especially with context windows being so large nowadays for these larger models, especially 1 million context window for Opus, it can get a lot of context and it can kind of remember all of the concept. So basically the outcome is like a brand overview, the product mechanics, any studies associated with it, what kind of is the overarching brand voice, then like a market analysis, how is the market sophistication level, how are competitors, and stuff like this. Then again, it looks at reviews, it extracts those. So then it basically saves full on reviews in another document. Then based from those reviews, it creates a language bank, which is essentially just words that the brand is, or that, at least reviews are mentioning over and over again. So you can kind of try to identify patterns from that. Then it looks at competitors. Automatically it finds those. It kind of sees what kind of ads, they have running using Foreplay again. And then, based on all of that information, it creates, persona documents, which feature the angles, the, benefits for that specific angle that you can use and stuff like this, essentially.
And are these then stored as just MD files locally, or do you have your own database of things where you're organizing, or how are you kind of organizing the data? Because one thing is to have these amazing skills do all the crawling, but kind of how do you make sure you don't lose any data on the way, and can it kind of take a look at the big picture?
Yep. So I think the first step, when you start using this, probably just save them locally, right? And then whenever you basically open up a new chat, what I would do is create a project in Claude for your brand, and then whenever you start a new chat, just insert them manually. Over time, that obviously gets tedious. So I think the next step from there is basically taking it to Supabase, which is kind of a database. It also has an integration, an official integration, even with Claude. So you can just connect it to Claude, tell it hey, I want to create a new database based on this, or you can even connect the skill to Supabase. So the way that I've set it up is any kind of research doesn't even get saved for me locally. It automatically gets uploaded to Supabase, because the skill has those instructions hey, here's the Supabase table I want you to use, upload all of that information, etc.
Okay, so you have that. So you're talking about doing all this other consulting with agencies. And obviously unlocking persona is a massive thing that people are getting into. What are other things that you've been building or that you're helping agencies instill that are blowing their minds? Because this is a big one. If you can go to the client and say, hey, look, I've got a whole bunch of new persona research, that's awesome. But what else are you building or messing around with that people have really been loving?
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I think first thing is probably automatic reports, right? So I'm building this for one agency who they want their strategist to basically kick off, the day with, some automatic reporting of hey, this is how, the ad account is going. And these type of scripts are working well. Here maybe some ideas for videos that you can do some iteration ideas. So this one is then connected to the official Meta API. So it can basically, download, or it gets all of the information from the ad account, such as amount spent, hook rate, etc. Right, and it then saves all of this information in Supabase as well. So this basically build a whole interconnected system, right? You save your personas in there, you save your well-performing ads in there, you save the ad copies, the headlines, and all of that data that is associated with this ad account in there. And then each morning they wake up to a new report of hey, this ad is trending, this ad was maybe a recent launch, it's getting a bunch of spend pretty fast, or this ad is 30% below our CPA threshold, is performing super well. Here's some patterns that we've identified. Let's try angle XYZ or forever. Let's do more ads for, with a split screen hook that seems to be performing well, in that direction.
And so this is based on what Meta is saying, though, right? That's the downside of it, is it's based on their reporting. So it's it's not a third party or anything, but could you cross-reference it against, Northbeam or something like that if the client wanted to?
I think I haven't played around with Northbeam actually, but I think there's a Northbeam API, so you can definitely play around with that. I know also that and I've tested this, that Motion is coming out with like an API and an MCP server. So you can connect with that as well. And Motion is obviously also connected with Northbeam. So yeah, I think that's basically going to help in the long run. For now, it's basically just quote unquote meta, and I still it's definitely still more actionable than just looking at Foreplay and like maybe even scraping your own ad library.
Okay, and sorry, one more question: how do you like tactically do this? Like, what are you using? I mean, I know I have a general idea, but like, what are people wanting to set this up? How are they setting it up?
Setting this up. So for I think an easy version, a super easy version is getting 2-minute reports, which is just kind of like Supermetrics was back in the day. It's just like a reporting tool where you get all of your ad data into Google Sheets. So you create a report, you get the data in Google Sheets. You don't even need to connect to any Meta API or whatever. It's super straightforward. And then you use Apify, which is kind of like a scraping website, and they have a kind of official Meta ad scraper as well. And then you get the post links from 2-minute reports. Just give them to Apify. It basically scrapes the like URL of the asset, so you can like download the video, you can download the image, and then just give that to Gemini. And then you can basically add that data. Like you get all of the information that you need, like it's plus the like downloadable files, and you can just add that to Supabase. So you don't need any like Meta API. You don't need to custom code anything really. Just pretty straightforward 2-minute reports. Set up the reports that you're looking at anyway, like maybe high-level account overview, and then also you look at like daily ad spend or whatever, and then you can just add that to Supabase.
But do you then run like a scheduled running Claude Code, or how do you actually trigger these reports?
Yeah, so for these reports, so 2-minute reports you can schedule, so that runs automatically, every day, every week, however often you want it to run. And then for getting the data into Supabase, there's another service that I'm using. It's basically called Railway. So what you can do on there, you can connect like your GitHub, and then also basically set up a schedule. So it also runs every single week, and then it that's for like the Slack automation to get the report into Slack. Costs like $5 a month, so it's basically free, and then it runs every week and basically creates that Slack report essentially.
Okay, cool. What I think is really interesting when I talk to different people like you, Freddie, is that what we're learning now is kind of the processes and what's useful and what's not useful, and I feel like the tools are constantly changing, but we're realizing kind of what do we need help with and what we need to get done. And of course, the models will be better, the MCPs will get better. But what I think is really cool is that it's getting like week by week, it's getting more and more useful, and we kind of nail down what we want, and we can just like switch out small little tools along the way to make sure that just the output and the results are just getting better and better as the technology evolves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. I think at the beginning or maybe last year, like lots of stuff was maybe a little bit unnecessary. I think now it's actually like turning into like, which workflows are maybe like, taking up too much time or which can be automated, and then using AI to automate, those workflows. One example that I have is also like as a creative strategist, reviewing ads is obviously a big, chunk of the job, I guess, and one part of that is just like checking for grammar issues on the ads. Maybe some of the transcripts, they have like grammar issues, or maybe on the ads, maybe like a word is spelled in the wrong way or whatever. And if you're using certain, maybe Google Drive, for example, as long as they have an API, I'm using Frame for this, is that you can basically automate that kind of review part, right? So I'm setting up an automation right now that is, the brand is using ClickUp. As soon as it gets turned into, ready for review or whatever, we have the frame link linked in the ClickUp task. As soon as something turns to ready for review, it goes into Frame, basically using the official API, looks at the image and or video and kind of checks if there are like any grammar issues. It sounds like such a small like issue, but in the end, that is like saving me, at least speaking from my own perspective, like a whole lot of time if I don't manually have to like check the transcript or look at a whole 2-minute long video to see if there's like any grammar issues going on in that video.
That's great.
So one thing, I'll just jump in on a question, Freddie. So I think a lot of people are thinking about sort of an AI media buyer. And I'm curious if you think this is close. I mean, I know Thomas has done this, and Thomas can tell you briefly about his process. But, so the AI media buyer would go ahead and look at optimization ideas and correlation between like in-platform, MTA, MMM. And then it would be like approved by a person. So have you set this up for people? And if so, like how, outside of what you just talked about in terms of like automated reporting, what other things would you set up to make sure, and what tools would you use to, because I think a lot of people are thinking about this. It's like, bring me the ideas and then let me say yes or no.
AI-DTC-WTF is brought to you by Motion. And this episode is brought to you by Runneth from Motion. And if you run paid social, I mean, obviously you know Motion. It's a creative analytics platform that everybody uses. But the thing I've been obsessed with lately is Runneth. And it's their AI agent that lives right inside of your ad data. The simplest way to explain it, most people use AI by asking it one thing, like, hey, what did we do yesterday? How'd it go? Runneth is the upgrade of that. You just tag it and ask it to do almost anything. It goes into your account, does it, like build me this week's creative recap, pull the data and write a brief on what to iterate next, tell me which ads to make next. And it goes on and does this in plain English. So two things that actually make it really special, right? So under the hood, it's Claude, right? And anything Claude can do, Runneth can do basically even better as long as you give it access. And second, it's wired from everything Motion has. So the AI tags, the creative, the frame by frame breakdowns, and then it's trained by $14 billion in ad spend on Motion's customers, right? So it's pretty insane. So the way that, we're using it, and I know some other colleagues are using it, like I looked at what they're doing and we talked through it. Like people are, having it drop a morning brief in Slack on how the account's performing. It gets smarter every time it runs. It's less like a tool and more like a creative strategist working while you sleep. So go see it at motionapp.com. That's Runneth from Motion, and make ads that win without getting lucky.
Yeah, I don't actually have set it up yet, but I also saw Zach's tweet, I think, about him like automating media buying as well. I don't know if you saw that, Andrew. Zach Stocks. But I think we are like basically almost there. I think a lot of the stuff that helps with this is basically giving the LLM or the AI context, like giving it your own SOPs, like basically like what you would give your own media buyer, you need to give it to the AI, right? And then maybe the first run isn't the greatest, or maybe also not the second, but you give the AI feedback, and then, it gets the memory, it becomes basically a self-learning kind of, agent essentially. And then maybe in a month or so, you can automate a lot of the media buying. And just because every brand is different, every brand obviously has different like media buying principles and what they act upon. Maybe it's CBO, maybe ABO. Just make sure that you give good context to the AI of like how you do stuff. And then, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can automate media buying to a good chunk.
For sure. Yes, 100%. And I think this is definitely kind of the next phase of what agencies are going to do. So one thing we've been talking about previously is like doing research or finding typing mistakes and all that stuff, right? Actually pushing the buttons is possible today through most of these different APIs, right? I think we're going to see big moves in that space just within a few months. I've been playing around myself I have 6 OpenClaw Mac Minis on my in my office around me at this moment, and they're doing media buying now for 10 of my clients from my agency, and it's still a little bit scary, but it actually is working. And we have, of course, our team monitoring and checking and everything. So I think that if me with a little bit of duct tape are able to set something like this up, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting services going forward around this for sure. Because you're talking to so many different agencies, Freddie, what I would like to get your kind of gut feeling on is how in front of this are DTC agencies today. Are they afraid of this? Are they like surfing the wave, or are they just waiting? Kind of what's the general vibe you get out there?
Yeah, I think they're excited for it. Like some of the stuff that I've seen like agency owners build is super crazy to me. Like they've built some really advanced stuff. And I think everybody's like excited that they can maybe also have their employees do more important work, whereas before maybe they had to, name ads or like even launch ads or like, do media buying. Maybe you can do more analysis or maybe you can do more like high level stuff that's actually moving the needle more than like naming an ad. Or stuff like this.
I think the agency process is coming down to it's getting rid of sort of the noise. And I think a lot of where, I've seen agencies step in and say like, okay, I've got to figure this out. I got to get better at this. Is a lot of people spend time, like you said, getting together reports and reporting. And I think, sort of wrapping all those into a place where a client can take action, I think is the next step. A lot of it is like the analysis is happening. You're giving people these reports on personas. You're putting it in front of them on a platter, and the client's like, oh, cool. And like, really the next thing of this is being able to say like, yes, like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what you think in terms of talking to other agencies. Obviously, like, I assume these are German agencies, or maybe they're not, but they're probably, if they are, they're quite orderly in terms of like getting people the information that they need. How do you see this evolving, like in terms of other tools people are using and things that they can, get on and get learning to make sure that they're ready for this?
Yeah. So I think like one of the agencies that I'm working with, they basically have their own like custom software, I guess, already, right? They have basically kind of like a place for their strategists, where basically, those reports essentially generate ad copies, they generate scripts, and stuff like this. And then essentially they approve of of those concepts. And if they approve, it goes basically to the client. And, if the client likes it, they basically produce that type of content. So I think kind of that's like, the evolvement. You obviously, you have the reports, and I think that's already pretty helpful. But obviously, next step is like basically generating that meaningful work, which I think if we're talking about creative, is that, for example, script writing or like finding patterns, for example, and then, they may have like ads manager or like creative strategists, agents that find those patterns. Here's like winning ads, and then it goes straight to the creative strategists, and they approve of those patterns, they approve of the new hooks, and then go straight to the client. So basically kind of like a mini SaaS, I guess, for those clients of the agency.
It's so true. I think it's it's interesting to me because I think each piece of this that is getting more automated. So in terms of creation of like, okay, we're building this, the persona builder, and then it's like the next phase of it is now it's like it's building the persona builder. You have the brand guidelines, it's got it all in there. It's stored in Supabase, and then now it's able to like build and potentially publish and start to optimize ads. As you train it over time, I think that's a really valuable one to think about as you kind of go through and learn this stuff, Freddie. Like obviously you're deep in it. How are you continuing to upskill yourself? Like how are you making sure that you're staying on top of it as much as you possibly can?
Yeah.
Or is it just messing around?
No, I get FOMO on the daily about like there's so much new stuff always coming out. I think basically kind of committing to like one kind of like platform, like, Claude, and then also like Codex. For example, I haven't played around that much with OpenClaw yet. And then kind of staying on top, and then also just being a lot of on Twitter. Like there's so much stuff being built on Twitter as well that other people are sharing. Like every day I probably save like 10 bookmarks. And then also just a lot of like, hey, I have this idea, for example, like the creative automation with like automatically reviewing the ads. Like I think that popped in my head yesterday. I'm like, I don't want to review grammar anymore. Just type it into Claude Code. Like here's what I want. Here's which software I'm using. Can you help me build this? And then 95% of the time it's just, yes, it can help me build this. And then I think the next question is just like, how can I integrate that into my workflows? Like how can I make use of this, not as a standalone workflow, but actually kind of part of my daily routine, I guess, right? So it's not a one-time build, and it's helpful for like 5% of the cases, but like actually helpful on the daily.
And the creative stuff that you're built, so you see in terms of Facebook advertising today, creative being obviously the main lever, which I think a lot of us agree on. Do you think that there's going to be a period of time in which like the optimization or the automatic stuff that we're doing with AI is going to be adjusting bids and things like that? Or do you think that's mostly going to live within, like, it might be a leading edge to do it now, but like mostly Meta's going to be doing that itself and you're not going to have to mess with that as much? Like, is it mostly going to be around continue to optimize creative? And also on top of that, like, have you done anything messing around with like the other parts of the funnel, like websites or whatever? Because you can do all you can on the Meta side, but like obviously the landing pages are massive as well in terms of getting that flow and the match between those personas.
Yep. So regarding Meta, I mean, I think, you can definitely set up I don't know if the API has bid caps actually, if you can change those on the API, but like, I think like the stuff can be automated for sure, whether it's Meta or whether it's like, through an API, through some sort of skill. I don't, that's yet to come basically. But I think in terms of landing pages, like definitely, I've played around with this. It's pretty fascinating what you can build. Like I spent like, one afternoon basically built like kind of like a CRO landing page agent, which basically, generates landing pages for a client. So basically based on the research from the research agent, that kind of landing page agent uses that research and the words, the reviews, etc. Then you could give it like one other landing page that you are having, whether it's a PDP or like an actual landing page. And basically it goes then in there, analyzes that landing page and like iteratively comes up with improvements. You can task it to make like small improvements, kind of like a CRO agency would do it basically. Or you can also kind of completely, restart new landing pages. And those landing pages are so like I was surprised myself, like how on brand they were. Like it was using the exact like even the copy, like it's basically split. So it has like a copy agent, which is basically only responsible for the copy. Then it kind of has like a layout agent, which is only responsible for the sections, for the layouts. Like, how is the hero structured? Like how is the kind of buying section structured, etc.
And it was pretty good.
Yeah, you saw the tweet?
Yeah. Well, so what tools did you use to build that one?
What tools? I just like Claude Code basically, like typed it in, like, hey, like I want to build like a landing page agent for this brand. Like here's the research that I've done on that brand. Please make sure you follow those instructions. And then thought of like how, because I think like in terms of like building this, you need to have specialized agents which are responsible for one specific task. I think, one landing page agent which does everything probably won't be as good as having like 3 different agents building the same landing page, like a copy agent, section building agent, and like a CRO agent, which checks for like CRO improvement stuff. So I think like giving one agent a very specific task is like super helpful with this type of stuff, right? Like you don't have one creative strategist agent, you have like one which is responsible maybe for analyzing the ads, and then another one which is responsible for like writing the scripts and stuff like this.
Just it's so exciting to just see what's possible and the quality that's just becoming so much better every day. So it's just like I'm both kind of scared and really, really excited at the same time because it's just changing so fast and it's just hard to keep yourself updated. So I think that the FOMO you're referring to, Freddie, is real with everyone. And I think the more every one of us can kind of share best practices and also kind of all our fuck ups, that's what we want, is just kind of help each other navigate and understand how to maximize this to help as much as possible with our clients and our businesses.
Yeah, well, Freddie, thank you for coming on. Freddie will do a quick Loom overview of some of the things he talked about on this that we'll put in the show notes, and we'll share that along with any links to the other things that he talked about. And if you want to contact Freddie, I can put you in touch with him. You can always email me, andrew@foxwelldigital.com, and I'm happy to connect. Freddie, you're a rock star, dude. Super appreciate having you on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Freddie.
Thanks.